Thank you, Kelly. Okay, fun. I think I'm gonna take this off, right? Woo! Spring break. Gosh. Okay, I have to start. Hi, I'm Marlee. I want to thank Jordan for making this amazing space, because, you know, the first thing I thought about when I got to pick Sanctuary, right? I was given the list, and I was like, Sanctuary. And if you know anything about my work, you know I'm absolutely obsessed with God. Not the Christian one, but if you like the Christian one, that's really cool too. But I like a lowercase g, no gender kind of God. So, but when I think of sanctuary, I think of like spaces, like space making. And so, some of you may have been to this space, but I had a space on Division Avenue for a couple of years called Have Company, and it was so just like my sanctuary, and so it's so special. I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where we are today, and so it's just so exciting to me to get to like be in spaces like this, that I would have loved to like stumble in here as a teenager and like see these books and these things would have been so special. So thank you, Jordan, for creating this space, and thank you for inviting me today. The first thing I'm like thinking of is, so I was at my parents' house, who live up the street, last night for dinner, and growing up, my dad worked in radio, and so I haven't used like a microphone in years. I can't remember the last time I like spoke into a microphone, and we were talking, and my dad has like all of these interviews of like interviewing like the greatest country radio stars of all time. And we're talking about like, we should digitize them and make them into like a cool podcast or something. So he goes in the basement and he comes up and he's like, I couldn't find the tapes, but I found these. And there are 2 tapes that just say Marlee Grace on them that are from 1993, which would have put me at 5 years old. And it's like we hit play and it's already me. And, you know, it's like, I actually got really teary-eyed. It felt like this, it was like, oh my God, I'm listening to me, but it's like this other thing that's speaking to me. And so as much as I'm talking about like physical space, to me, sanctuary is also just like all time and space and something beyond, like something in the cosmic realm. I was like, there's drugs, and then there's listening to a cassette of you as a 5-year-old. And they're the same. And I'm listening, and it goes, I'm literally in the microphone, I'm like, Marlee. And I'm just staring at it. I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm like talking, and I'm like, I've got a brother. And I'm like singing, and then it's like silent for a long time, and then all of a sudden I go, you put the lime in the coconut, drink it. And I'm like singing it over and over. I'm just staring at this cassette player. I'm like, what is going on? And then I go, Daddy, Dad. And then you kind of hear my dad. And then literally I'm like, you put the lime. And then he like hits play, and it's like Harry Nilsson singing the song. It's like I was inventing my own radio show at 4.5 years old. So I wanted to start with that. But I actually want to start, I want to read something there is an interdisciplinary publishing initiative in Baltimore called Press. That's really cool. And they have this whole sanctuary manifesto. And so I'm about to read you something that you can actually order as like a really big, cool poster, if you really like it. But they have this poster that says what I'm about to read, and then there's like 38 different like parts of this manifesto. And so it says, sanctuary is inside of you. Finding your inner sanctuary has to do with recognizing your own power, privilege, and the role you can play in any situation. How do you carry sanctuary with you wherever you go? And then 2 of the parts of the manifesto I like are, we can protect sanctuary by keeping it discreet, and sanctuary is not yet an experience, it is the horizon. So I sort of like split this little chat up for us in a couple of parts, and I'm just gonna riff a little bit. I joked right before that I was like, I have no idea what I will say, but that's not true. I know exactly what I'm gonna say. But yeah, you know, Kelly mentioned most of my practice is as an improviser, and, my practice is sort of rooted in dancing. I grew up dancing. That's what I went to school for. And now I write books, which Jordan so beautifully carries here sometimes. And then also told me they sell out a lot, which is really cool. But I've written a couple books, I teach, and I just moved back to Michigan a year ago tomorrow. So it's actually sort of a special time to be here, and I bought a house this year. Or I bought a house in November. And so I kind of want to just like walk us through my sort of process of like finding God and buying a house. And as like a queer, non-binary weirdo who grew up poor with parents who are still like working their asses off to try to pay their rent on time kind of thing. And how do you live and inherit that and like still make a sanctuary for yourself in your body and in your space. So I was writing last night, and madcap beings are not created equal. I am jacked. Hold, please. That was the other thing in the like Marlee's mini radio show we were listening to last night. I'm like riffing, and then I sigh, like already the author of How to Not Always Be Working. I go, I need a break. And then it's just silent, and I like come back and I'm talking more, and I go, I love taking breaks. Like 4 years old, I'm like, I love a break. I am gonna take another sip of that madcap juice, though. I really do love madcap. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, here's my little list that I made last night. At first I was like, my talk in 7 parts. And then I was like, it's 30 minutes long. It doesn't need to be that long. But I was writing, I said, here's the like, if I had a whiteboard right here, I would say sanctuary as becoming, as space, as pathways, as gardens, as home, as the page, and as service. And I also I was like doing a little Googling last week about sanctuary, and it's like the holiest of holy places, which I was like, yes, the holiest of holy places. So I'm gonna start with becoming. And so in 2011, I got sober. I was 22 years old, and it was the last thing I wanted to do, especially in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was like, cool, so I'm 22 and I have to sit in a basement of a church with 70-year-old straight white Republicans and talk about God. Miss me with that. I was like, this is not gonna be working well for me, and I'd rather be blacked out and wake up in the Pizza Hut parking lot in Easttown than be here. And yes, that did happen to me once. Someone said, hello? And I said, I'm awake. It was 3 p.m. And so I really, really, really did need to get sober. And so I got sober. And so, the thing about the anonymous fellowship that I may or may not be a part of, when you walk in, on the wall, it's sort of like you need to find a higher power, and then it names it as God and gives it he, him pronouns, which I was also like, oh, this is just not gonna work. And then I like stuck around, I stuck around for enough time to sort of be like, oh, cool, like other people are inventing sort of their own versions of God that are really, really cool. And the literature of that anonymous 12-step room, talks about God as, it says you get catapulted into the 4th dimension of existence. And I was like, oh, I can do that. That's fucking sick. And so I stayed, and I haven't had a drink since May 17th, 2011, which is great. I know, but I say that because, and I also, I was really thinking there's, let me see if I can do this without crying. There's a lot of people in this room right now, and I want to say, like, the process of, building sanctuary in myself and getting sober and living the life I have the last 12 years and buying a house is like by the grace of God, like by the grace of God and the people in this room and in my life. It's not anything I'm talking about today I really didn't do by myself. So I want to just, say that. But, so I get sober, and, I've really spent, I really like packed a lot into the last 12 years or so. It's like I got sober, I fell in love, I got married, I got divorced. 3 years later, I moved back in with that ex-husband. Highly recommend. If anybody in the room has an ex-husband, move in with him. He's a great cook, he's hot, he's nice. You don't want to have sex with him anymore. You fight less. I don't know. It's fun. And so I did that for 9 months, and it was really, really special. And then I fell in love with someone else and dated that person. We moved out west, and then we uncoupled last January. And she stayed out west, and I moved back to Michigan. And it was so, that's the other thing, like, when I think sanctuary, I think swimming. Like when I am in Lake Michigan, it is the thing that I do that like I have no thoughts, right? And this, you've already seen me be in like 800 different places in the last 4 minutes. It's like, when I am swimming, I am like nothingness. It's like, it is truly my sanctuary. And so when Jackie and I broke up last year, it was like within seconds, I was like, I have to be where there's water. Like that was, I didn't even think of like, I want to be back in Michigan. I want to be closer to my parents. Like I didn't think of like, where is smart to be? I was like, I have to be where there's water. And so I packed up my belongings and came back here, and I'm really happy to be here, and moved to Traverse City for a little bit, and then I was in Northport in the peninsula, and now I'm in Cedar, sort of mid-Leelanau Peninsula. But, packing that much into sobriety and somehow like not drinking or dying in that amount of time, and sort of how much I went through, really like the things I kept coming back to. And this is what I would like, I almost paused to be like, we should have a writing portion of this talk today, but I think I would rather maybe just offer some tools along the way that you can sort of take with you when you leave. And something I really think about is like, what am I devoted to? And that's sort of what brings me back to that like space of sanctuary, and is what really like keeps me in my values with my job and with my art practice, because I love like discipline. And Kelly mentioned personal practice, which is this project. It's simply an Instagram feed that is me dancing, sometimes looking like that's a person who does have a degree in dance, and sometimes looks like a person who has never taken a dance class in their life. But it's like, it's a lot of me like dancing to Justin Bieber in my underwear in the living room, or like teaching dance class. But that, I'm like, why am I talking about this? The madcap, the jacked. I'm like, I'm just gonna do like a solo. Okay, hold on, let me look at personal practice, dance practice.
What am I devoted to?
Yes, and that's why we figured this out together. Okay, so when I'm asking myself, like, what am I devoted to? So the discipline of personal practice was like, I'm gonna do this every single day. So I did it every single day for a year, and then sort of like made a conscious decision to be like, that was really crazy to post a dance video every day for a year, and then kind of back away from it. So I love discipline, but I think sometimes when I become like undisciplined, which I don't love that word, I can think about like, what am I devoted to that sort of brings me back to myself. And so that is sort of my, I think, framework for like my own inner sanctuary and outer sanctuary, to be like, what am I devoted to? And so, okay, what's my little list? Back to my little list. Okay, so that brings me to the page, like sanctuary as the page. And I say that both as like a frequent journaler and morning pageser. Have we invented a word for that yet? Morning pageser. I'm a huge Julia Cameron head, if any of you have read The Artist's Way. Yeah, shout out Julia. I love her. And that book is, if you don't know it, it's a beautiful book that's like a 12-week creative unblocking course, sort of, that you can bring yourself through or do with others. And her biggest suggestion is that every morning you do 3 pages of like brain dump, sort of just journaling. So you're not like crafting something beautiful, you're just journaling, you're just writing. And she's really like, I love her because she's so, there was a New York Times article about her a couple years ago where she was literally like, I've maybe missed 3 days in the last 40 years. And you're like, okay. It's like her level of discipline is really intense, to the point where like, you know, commonly people will ask her and they'll be like, you know, I'm a single mom struggling. Like, I really want to do my morning pages, but my kids, you know, get up at 6. And she's like, get up at 5:30. And you're like, damn, Julia Cameron, like she's really like, you know, people are like, maybe I could do them in the afternoon. And she's like, they're called morning pages. And you're like, okay. And so I do my best to be, when I'm like doing my morning pages actively, is when I feel like that for me. And so my offer to you is to, if it's not morning pages, maybe it's like sitting for 5 minutes without your phone in the morning with your coffee. Maybe it's like taking your walk, you know, whatever it is that's like creating a container around yourself to hear God, and you can make up whatever else you want, right? The universe, spirit. It's like, to me, sanctuary is like, how do I hear God's message for me today? And we were, we were leaving this morning, our hotel, to come here, and something I also love to ask is like, I like to ask my higher power to enter a situation before I do. It goes a lot better usually, because when I'm trying to control and manage, it's like things start spinning. And so we're waiting for the elevator and there's a phone. And so I picked up the phone and I said, hey God, it's Mark. Can you get to my talk before I do? And then I like hung it up. And then we start driving and the sunrise was so beautiful. And it reminds me that like God has such a bigger imagination than I do. My higher power was like, oh, you just wanted me to show up at your talk earlier? Because baby, I've got a light show for you on the way. And I was like, wow, this is so good. And so that's the other thing is like, when I do my morning pages or pray, I really try to ask spirit to like, you tell me, you know, because it's so easy. It's like we live in this culture of like manifestation, you know. I love the meme, like, maybe you manifested it, maybe it's white privilege, you know. It's like, and that's I think that is like the other thing that I really think about, that, you know, is the framed in that initial thing that I read about sanctuary is like, where do I also use my gifts and my privilege, earned and unearned, you know, to create a space for others, which we'll sort of get to when I talk a little bit more about buying a house. But I really, you know, yes, I do write books, but, you know, I think for anyone who is just living in the world, to bring like a pen to paper is just so important. It's like that our brains, you know, linking to the hand is like really is just, it is like a channeling practice. You know, I love the artist Hilma F. Klint, who was a part of this group called The Five. There's 5 other weird queer Swedish women who were channeling together, and it's really just like, I think we can get sort of caught up in like the difference between like spirituality, witchcraft, manifestation, new age. It's like, it kind of reminds me of like circling all the way back to the beginning of what I was saying, of being like 22 and being like, I can't believe I have to sit in the basement of a church with these old people who are nothing like me. And now like that is my greatest sanctuary. Like, I love these people, you know, who, you know, we certainly don't vote. I'm like, they're like token gay, you know, they're like, we love you. And they're like literally voting for my rights to go away. And I'm like, I literally love you too. It's like, let's save each other's lives every day. But definitely don't let me have an abortion if I need one. You know, it's like really like sticky in that way. And I love that. I'm like, give me more of that, you know, like give me, I want to be less around people who think like me. I'd much rather kind of be in that like juicy space. But, you know, I feel like that's where I'm like, how can I like call God into any situation? This is hard to give a talk. I'm like, how did I get back to the church basement with the old people? Okay, the page. So yeah, I do feel like whatever like a thing you can do to sort of like hear what your higher power has in store for you, right? That's like something I like to think about. So can I get a time check?
9:30.
Sick. That's perfect. Okay, so next part, we jump ahead. Here I am, I'm here, I own a house, which is the craziest thing, the craziest sentence I could ever think to say. I'm gonna tip this a little bit. So here's a cool, funny thing I did, which I'm gonna just not recommend, is I didn't do my taxes for 7 years. And the thing about, so the IRS are like some of my closest friends now. Like I have their number saved. I know exactly what extension 684. If you kind of like want to talk to them, that's pretty quick, kind of quick to get to them with that extension. They gave me my own. No, I'm just kidding. And the other thing about not doing your taxes for 6 years is if you owe like $4,000, 7 years later you owe $20,000 for that year. So again, just I don't recommend it. And so what happened was, you know, I sort of mentioned like inheriting like a lot of money stories. When Kelly was like, my word is rich, I was like, yes. Like I actually had a dream the other day where I just wrote, I am rich on the top of a piece of paper in my dream. And I love, it's like, yeah, am I rich in money? Maybe, but like I meant it in like, I am rich in like love and friendship and connection and space. And, you know, but I grew up with like, rich people are bad and being rich is not cool. And we're gonna struggle and it's gonna be hard to keep the lights on, but that is the value that like means we are like laboring and we are working our asses off and there's no way to kind of go higher because we have a salary and that's kind of like what we're working with. And so when I first got a book advance for How to Not Always Be Working, it was crazy. I mean, I had never seen that much money in my life, and I made a huge jump in my income. It was like I had been making, you know, less than $10,000 a year to getting, you know, checks that were 5 figures, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And so through this time, I was like, here's the thing about being self-employed. If you don't do your taxes, you have no idea how much money you make. And I was really afraid to see how much money I was making because I knew that I was like tripling anything my parents had ever made. And so I really wanted to buy a house. So like 4 years ago, I had started thinking like, I want to buy a house, I want to have a house. And I mean, talk about sanctuary. I was like, I just want to have my own space. And part of my practice has been both at Have Company and at another house that I rented here in town in 2019 when I moved in with my ex-husband, is hosting artist residencies. I love hosting artist residencies. I love hosting artists. It's a huge part of my life. It brings me so much joy. And I knew I wanted to have a house that I could be hosting people. And so to buy a house, you have to show them how much you make. It's so great. It seems obvious, right? And when you don't have a paycheck, you have to do your taxes. And you have to have a credit that's above 450. So if you want a credit score above 450, usually you just have to be alive, right? The first time I showed that to someone, they were like, that's what people who have passed on have as a credit score. And I'm alive. So, I'm happy to say today that my credit score is 695. What's up? It actually did get above 700, but then I don't know what happened. Then I bought a house. Then they so let me just take some. This is gonna go down in history as like Madcap's craziest talk. Okay, so I had sort of been like doodling along with my taxes throughout the years, but then wasn't filing them. And I was really also in the story of like, I'm so far behind, how am I gonna catch up? And long story short, and the other thing was I had never paid any of my student loans, and I also didn't like put them in deferment, so they had gone to collections. And so I don't really know how like nobody ever found me. I was just maybe I was like moving around a lot, but I was like, no one's really calling me and like checking in, so I guess I'll just keep not doing these things. But again, then I was like, I do want to buy a house. So I I called the University of Michigan. Oh, and I didn't even have a diploma. So I was also kind of like, did I graduate? And so I called them and I was like, can I have my diploma? And they were like, well, your student loans are in collections, and so we can't give you the diploma. And I was like, oh, and then I called the credit people and they were like, your credit is 450 because your student loans are in collections. And I was like, so I paid off all my student loans. And then, thank you so much. And then my credit score went up, and then I filed all my taxes. And the funny thing about that was the IRS, bless their hearts, didn't open any of their mail for like 8 months. So then I had to wait for them to open the taxes, and then they did. And then I got pre-approved for a loan, and really shout out to FHA loans. If any of you are like sitting here being like, how do I buy a house? You can ask me a question in the Q&A section. I will do my best to help you. But an FHA loan was basically, I only had to put 3.5% down. So it's definitely like a more accessible in if you have a cash flow but don't have a lot saved. And so I bought a house. Here's the secret. Is this being recorded? Don't tell the IRS. Okay, I don't care. That's fine. They're not gonna get a hold of this. I'm like, don't want to look. I'm like, there's an IRS agent right there. I can feel it. I can feel it. Just kidding. Okay, so the crazy thing was, in order for me to get my loan, I had to show them that I had paid, that I was on a payment plan with the IRS, because you'll never believe how much I owe the IRS. And there's some podcast that exists somewhere that you can hit play on and you can hear the number. Will I say it here? Yeah. Actually, it's so, you know what? It's so beautiful. Today is 127. That is one of my lucky numbers. And I do owe the IRS, ready? I want to get a cheer after this. $127,000. Let's get it. Okay, so that's the other thing I want to say. I'll wrap this up shortly. That's, to most people, they would be like, that's terrifying, and now I don't want to do my life anymore. And it's like, this is where, like, first of all, the IRS is like, I'm a little like, if Trump's not going to pay his taxes, why the fuck am I going to pay mine? But I am going to pay them because I don't want my house to get taken away. And so that number is insane. It's insane. And I feel like most people would be like, Marlee should not be telling anyone how much they owe. That's crazy. But it does feel really, I feel, and this is where like Sanctuary is like, I feel very called to be a person who is that transparent about their money. It's like, thank you, I appreciate that. You know, it's like when I teach quilt class, I make more in a month than my mom ever made in a year of like working her ass off. And that's a hard thing for me still, and it makes me overspend, it makes me want to under-earn. And so I feel like I could now talk about like money for a whole other Creative Mornings talk, which I will end here. But, you know, having the house now, and actually it's really beautiful to think of like my mom came up a couple weeks ago and just seeing her like so relaxed and having fun and like smoking her joints and just like chilling and like watching house fixer-upper shows together. I was like, this is why. And this is the like, how do I use my privilege to like create a space for my family when they can't have that space for themselves? And my family is like my chosen family that is in this room today, and the many artists I hope to host in this space. You know, I'm grateful to steward, 5 acres of land, and I really am excited to like put some other structures on the space and like be hosting people. And that's the sanctuary I want to see in the world today, and hope that like your homework is to like think about how do you create that space for other people and for yourself, like especially after going through like a huge uncoupling last year, where like my home did not feel like a safe space for me or a space I could express myself. Having my own home today is just, and like getting to paint it the colors I want and leave my fucking socks where I want them to be. Maybe I don't want to tuck the top sheet in, maybe I don't want to do that today. It's like I get to like have the space that I want to have. And so, yeah, I hope that as you like leave here today, you can think about like, who am I becoming? what am I devoted to, and how do I create like a sanctuary for myself and for others? Because like that is how we resist the patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism and abolish the systems that are oppressing us. Say that. And I hope you all have a beautiful day. Goodbye. And like you put the lime in the coconut, you drink it raw, you put the lime